Some kids can talk, but don't in certain situations. Maybe they suddenly go silent at school or church or around other people, especially people they don't know. In this episode of our series, When Communication is Hard, we're talking about selective mutism and other anxiety-based communication challenges. These kids may have words. They may know what they want to say, and they still feel unable to access their voice or to access their words when they're in certain situations. We'll look at what may be happening beneath the silence and why pressure backfires, making talking harder, and how safety, predictability, and connection gently support speech over time. If you've ever wondered whether your child is being shy, stubborn, or overwhelmed, this episode will help you see the struggle with fresh eyes and respond with more understanding and hope. Let's dig in. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dina Lynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back. Before we jump into today's episode, I have a couple of updates to share with you. First, some of you know that the Language of Play podcast was nominated for the Authority Awards this year. While I wasn't selected as a winner, it was still an honor to be considered alongside so many incredible voices. I am grateful for everyone who has listened, shared episodes, and supported this mission of helping families build communication and connection. And if you're thinking, wait, last episode she said she did win, and that was a different award. That was Best Lifestyle Podcast for 2026 Women Podcasters Award. Yes, we won that one. That is where you voted, which reflects a community of parents, caregivers, and professionals who care deeply about helping children thrive. Now, speaking of community, this summer I've opened a new support class specifically for families raising children with speech and communication challenges. It's a place where you can come and learn practical strategies, ask questions, find encouragement, and connect with others who understand this journey, while also getting teaching from the lens of a speech pathologist. If you're hearing about it now and wondering if you have missed too much, you haven't, because new members can still join and you will receive access to the recordings of every session we've had so far. That means you can catch up at your own pace while still participating in upcoming discussions and trainings. If you'd like more information, check the links in the show notes. I'd love to have you join us. Now, let's get into today's episode. All right, this is the 9th episode in the series When Communication is Hard, and we are focusing on selective mutism and anxiety-based speech challenges. A mom talked with me who said, My child talks nonstop at home. They tell stories, ask questions, sing songs, negotiate bedtime like a lawyer. And then they walk into preschool or church or a birthday party or a family gathering, and they hide behind me. They don't say a single word. It's so frustrating. I don't know what is going on. She seems stubborn. I don't know why she's refusing to talk. Some other parents that I've talked to have asked me questions like, is my child actually shy? Are they refusing to talk, or did I do something wrong? There are so many feelings that we have as parents when our children go silent at a time that they need to simply say hello or my name is. And some of those times can actually feel embarrassing for us as parents. So let's tear this topic apart piece by piece. First, it's always important to remember that communication is more than knowing words. Your child may know exactly what they want to say and be unable to say it. Communication involves your brain, your emotions, your body, your memory, the environment, and anxiety can temporarily block speech, which could be from the voice level, or it could be from knowing the words you want to say in that moment. It's like what's in the brain isn't connecting to the mouth. This is different from not knowing a language. It's like having the answer to a question and then freezing when everyone looks at you. It's almost like test anxiety. You've studied the material, you know the material, but then when you sit down with your pencil in hand and you're looking at this test, it's like the anxiety of taking the test suddenly freezes your brain from being able to reach the answers that are in you. So what actually is selective mutism? Well, selective mutism is considered an anxiety disorder in which a child is able to speak in some situations but consistently unable to speak in others. An example is that the child talks freely at home but not in school. Maybe a child will do the opposite and they'll speak with their teachers but not with their parents. Now that is highly unusual, but I have seen that happen only one time. And then maybe the child will talk with siblings but not with unfamiliar adults. The term selective mutism can be really confusing and sort of misleading because it sounds like the child is choosing not to talk. So parents assume my child is choosing not to talk, but that is not the case. I want to change how you think about it because the child is experiencing a level of anxiety that makes speaking feel impossible. As an overview, when we talk about when communication is hard, it usually is because something is getting in the way. And in this case, what's getting in the way is anxiety. If we take a look at what it looks like, here's what parents often see. Maybe you go out into a setting where there's many people. Maybe you attend a wedding for a family, and your child whispers only to the parent. Maybe they will nod instead of speaking. Maybe they'll point or gesture. Often these kiddos avoid eye contact and appear frozen. They often appear completely comfortable while they're remaining silent, and speaking only happens after this long warm-up period. The first child I met that was selectively mute was in first grade at the time that attention was brought to me regarding this child. The teachers had said, we've never heard her speak, but her mom says she talks just fine. That is quite concerning. And of course, the school staff is wondering, well, if she talks just fine, why doesn't she talk at school? Selective mutism at first wasn't on our radar. And I'm ashamed to admit, the first thing we wondered is if mom was making up stories or in denial. This mom talked with the teachers about the details, and the speech-language pathologist gave a nonverbal language test. She was solid. Everything mom said showed to be true, and she never became my student. She received other kinds of counseling help, and if my memory serves me right, I think she started talking at school right around the 3rd grade. Let's talk a little bit about what anxiety does to the brain. Anxiety activates the body's threat system. This means When the anxiety is triggered, a person is in the state of survival, and then they lose access to those words. Now, this does not mean that they're threatened actually, but it does mean that their brain hops into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, which is your survival response. When they go mute, that is a freeze response. Another way that we can talk about it is that the brain shifts from action to protection rather than communication, which causes thinking and language and social interaction all to become harder, and for some kids, it goes offline. A simpler explanation would be, when the brain feels unsafe, it focuses on survival. And to compare it, it would be like speaking can feel as difficult as running when your feet are stuck in wet cement. If your child is dealing with selective mutism, I hope that visual will help you to find compassion and understanding for the experience that they're actually having. They didn't choose it, but they're having it. And before we talk about what helps, let's talk about what doesn't help, because what doesn't help is our first response so often. And I hate to admit it, it was my first response too when I was new to understanding selective mutism. Often caring adults and parents will prompt the kids, adding pressure to them, saying things like, just say hi, or tell her your name, or just use your words. You see, that kind of command is adding pressure to our kiddos, which causes that wet cement to be thicker and harder for them to move in. Another thing that doesn't help is when the parent or someone else immediately speaks for the child so that the child doesn't ever have to rise to the occasion. In a subtle sort of way, you are affirming that this child doesn't have to speak, or that the anxiety is truly too powerful and they cannot get over it. You end up sending the wrong message when you speak for your child immediately. Another thing that does not help is rewarding the speech that your child says. So when they say hi back, you make a big commotion about it, giving lots of attention to the child for speaking. This will often have a rebound effect, and the child will want to become quiet again. And of course, we know that being in public and feeling embarrassed or pressured in front of other people never helps in any situation for people. All of these examples of what doesn't help actually increases anxiety and makes speaking harder. So now let's move to what does help. If you have a child that is dealing with selective mutism, the first thing you want to do is reduce the pressure. So let's think of other ways, alternative ways that we can allow our children to communicate without having to use speech in all settings at all times. We focus on reducing the pressure. Here are some alternative communications. It'd be gestures, pointing, using some pictures, maybe writing, or giving a choice type question so that there's less to respond. Remember, in this situation, we're not talking about kids that don't have language. We're talking about kids that have the vocabulary, they have built their language structures, they know what they want to say, and it is anxiety that is clamping in on their voice or blocking the words from getting out. The next thing that really does help is to build safety first, because children speak when they feel safe. So we can focus on connection, and that would be your heart-to-heart connection with your child so that you build trust, you build confidence, they know you've got their back. You can build predictability in there so that they know, oh, in this situation, you and they already have a plan of how you're going to handle when the pressure conversations come up. The 3 points in building safety would be connection, predictability, and trust. And then we do want to celebrate their participation, but not in a way that calls too much attention. So later and quietly, we can remember that celebration doesn't need to be balloons and rocket ships and fireworks. It can also be the wink, It can be the smile or the nod. So what do we celebrate? We celebrate the stepping stones on the way towards a speech. Maybe they're joining the group. Maybe they made eye contact with somebody. Maybe they're playing near the others, even if they're not playing with the others. Maybe they used the nonverbal communication and they successfully interacted without words. Progress is bigger than spoken words. We have to remember progress is all of these other steps. And when anxiety is impacting a child's ability to interact, we have to lessen the pressure, celebrate the parts that they're able to do, but not with so much celebration that they become embarrassed by the attention. Now, let's talk about some ways that we actually do that. So ways that we can reduce the pressure through play. This would be pretend play and turn-taking games. Maybe you're going to play with a puppet and role play what goes on. Maybe the play is going to be side-by-side activities with one child, your child, and another child, that they're just playing side by side. However the play happens, the function, why this works, is because play reduces the demand for performance. Children can play however they want to, and the overall goal is to reduce anxiety, to interact, to find a place where they feel belonging. And play facilitates that. Play can create a situation where two people or more are having shared attention. And while your child and another person is sharing attention on a particular play task or play activity, that builds the trust. It builds practice. It builds courage. And this, in and of itself, encourages the natural forms of communication that can happen in that setting, with or without the verbal piece. A simple summary of this might be that children often communicate more when they're focused on play than when the adults are focused on speech. I'm going to say that again. Children often communicate more when they are focused on play than when the adults are focused on speech. With these kids, as anxiety reduces, speech returns. So who is the person to call on when you need help, and when do you seek that help? Your speech-language pathologist certainly might be one of the person that is involved in support. So are mental health professionals, teachers, and sometimes you end up with a team that collaborates together. Seek support if the silence persists for months. Some kids will do this for a short period of time, but then they get over it. But if the silence is persistent, or you see a tremendous struggle, sometimes the struggle really impacts school participation. And sometimes the anxiety seems to be increasing, or the child becomes isolated. These struggles are indicators that it's time to seek some support. Another reason is simply because the family stress is getting more and more around the area of communication. That is a good reason to seek help too. Now let's bring this thing home and wrap it up. So in closing, this is an important thing to think about. A child who cannot speak in certain situations is not being difficult. They are having a difficult time. The child who is not speaking is not trying to be difficult for you. They are having a difficult time. When we understand what is happening beneath their silence, we can stop pushing and we can start supporting them. And remember that communication grows best in an environment of safety, trust, and connection. And because you're here, I know you are already working on that. You are already building that. And that doesn't mean you don't need support along the way. But I do believe that the listeners of the Language of Play are people who really want to build that connection with their kiddos and build communication skills. So with that thought in mind, don't measure communication only by the words you hear. Notice the courage that it took for your child to walk into the room, to join the activity, to make eye contact, or to stay engaged. Because kiddos that have anxiety-based disorders, like selective mutism, for them, those moments are often the first step towards finding their voice. It's the pieces we don't think about when we're comfortable with those pieces. And this is where the 5 core principles all come together that I have mentioned in nearly every episode within this series. Number 1 was lower the pressure. And for this topic, it really is pertinent. Relieve the anxiety. Number 2 was building success before accuracy. And for this situation, we're removing the barriers. Number 3, supporting the whole child. In this case, we're focusing on supporting emotions and access to whatever communication that they have, which might be gestures. Number 4 was repetition with meaning matters. And in this situation, what we're doing repeatedly is creating conditions for your child to build connections with other people. The meaning is in the connection. And of course, number 5 is parents, you matter more than perfection. You always have. You always will. And if you are seeking help, you can zoom down to those show notes where you can find resources to help you. And whenever you're getting support, always make sure that you have, 1, you get the specific skills for what you're trying to develop in your kiddo. And you want to learn those specific skills. And the second thing you want to look for is that you get training in brain development. Where is it that your child is at right now? What can you expect? What kind of changes can we make? And then third, you want to understand how to practice and when to practice so that your consistency can happen in your normal routines. Because if it's too hard, it won't get done. And the glue that holds it together is the relationship trust. These are the 4 key components to the Language of Play coaching program. And over my years working, I know that these are the 4 elements that, when combined, makes for successful change in your family. To review, we're not asking, why won't our kids talk? We're asking, what's making this hard right now? Their nervous system is prioritizing safety over speech. So if speech disappears, we don't push harder. We look for the barrier. And in this case, the barrier is anxiety. We take the pressure off. We support our kiddos. We build in connection, predictability, and trust. We celebrate the participation along the way. I hope this episode gave you a new way to look at your child or somebody else's child that you know who may be experiencing a selectively mute kind of situation. I hope it gave you fodder for understanding and compassion for these kiddos. Now I want to remind you to go to the show notes, follow the links, join our class. And if you're hearing this after the summertime, join our group. Thank you for joining us today on the Language of Play. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.